Hi everyone, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here for a new PB&J video. And today is the first in my series of Paint With Me Christmas cards featuring my favorite no-line watercolor look with Penny Black's gorgeous new Christmas stamps. And here is a look at the card that we will be painting together today. I just love this new candle stamp. So here's a look at this stamp. This is 40-799 Candlelight. And this is a great size stamp with lots of open area to make the coloring and painting really dynamic. So the card we're making today is a 5x7 sized card. Now my sentiment is from probably my favorite sentiment set this season. It is 30-871 Light of Christmas. Now I went ahead and pre-stamped this onto Canson 140-pound watercolor paper, and I will be painting this using Distress Ink re-inkers used as watercolors. I stamped this with Memento Desert Sand ink, and this gives me this very light look. And I find when I use this ink combined with the Distress Ink re-inkers used as watercolors, the stamped ink, the lines actually seem to take on the color of the ink that's applied on top of them. So it just adds to that no line look without the difficulty of trying to see a very light image. I can stamp this a few times in my Misty Stamp Positioning tool and get a really fairly dark stamped impression, so I don't feel like I'm squinting and afraid of everything sort of blending together as I paint. Now I have a whole video for you with more information about the exact colors in my palette. So I'm using Distress Ink re-inkers used as watercolors and a little bit of gouache paint as well. This video also has information about the papers I'm using, paintbrushes, and sort of my getting ready to paint process where I prep things in an assembly line style so I can really maximize my time and enjoyment of the stamping and the painting. And I will link that video for you down in the description box below so you can check that out if you have any questions. Also, I have listed and linked for you the Penny Black products used on this card specifically down in that YouTube description box. So you can see I painted on sort of the ground or the table first, and then I am adding sort of that glow coming from the candles up at the top. I am using care to I'm trying not to paint basically inside the lines. Right now I'm just trying to stay outside. I wet my brush, pick up dab it on the paper towel, then pick up just a touch of that ink and drop it into the area that is already wet. And if I move while that is still wet, that allows me to blend it out into the white using just water on my brush and get a pretty smooth blend from color into the light white of the card. Now up here closer to the flame, I'm adding a couple more layers of color while it's still wet just to darken that up and add to the glow. I have sped up this video, so no, I do not paint that fast, but otherwise we would be here all day. Now I'm coming in and I'm going to work on the candlesticks or the candle holders themselves. I am trying to be more careful about leaving some white, and this also helps delineate the different sections of the candle holder and makes them look shinier. This is difficult for me. I often sort of overpaint or paint all of the sections or all of the areas in. So I am really trying to leave some white. Now I do not get overly concerned about a light source and where exactly these reflections would be. So for example, on this, I'm focusing more on just picking one side, keeping that darker, and then moving it into the lighter on the other side of that section. This also helps me see the different sections so they don't all blend into just one giant blob, and add some variation and interest. So don't be afraid to leave some white because you're not exactly sure where it should be. I say just leave some on there for variation, and the eye will kind of see it how it's supposed to see it. It doesn't have to be science. This is a greeting card and it's meant to be fun. So if that sort of stresses you out, sort of this science of where should the highlight be, don't worry about it. Just leave one. The worst thing that can happen is it looks funny to you and you paint over it and don't have a highlight. Another place to look if you aren't sure or you want some guidance is to look on the packaging of your product. So either on the front or the back. We also try to give some ideas and shading ideas on there as well. So you can see I'm just kind of working section by section. It's not too wet, so I don't mind working on two sections that are right next to each other. But if it is a little bit wet, you can see there's been a couple of times where I skipped over a part and left it completely white. And that's because I wanted to be sure that the section that was touching it was dry before I went in and added more paint right next to it. That just keeps them all from sort of blending in into each other. Now I love with these candlesticks, like I said, with this entire stamp and these candlesticks, there's enough open area that this does not become overwhelming or feel too tiny and too detailed. Just this one stamp alone makes a gorgeous statement for your card. All of the penny black cling stamps from this new collection, Making Spirits Bright, are like that. They're just so bold, so beautiful and elegant, and you just need like one one of those stamps on your card and it looks complete and it looks beautiful. And one reason that I like to do assembly line style, and I talk about that in that other video that I've linked down in the YouTube description box below, is that I like to use the same paints and the same style of painting and even sometimes the same layout to cards, but I don't like to get bored with that. So what I do is I just switch up my images. So I don't like to often paint the same image like 10 times to make 10 cards, but I do like to paint and paint and paint and paint. So what I do is I just change up my stamped image and have multiple stamps that I use, and then I can use the same paints, the same brushes, the same setup, everything just out on my desk, but only change the image that I'm working with after I've painted it a few times. In that video, I also talk about prepping everything in advance. So doing all of the stamping, and that would even go back to as far as cutting down several sheets of 5x7 paper or standard A2 size cards, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, having those ready, then getting out the stamps and the inks and stamping the main images, then stamping just the sentiments on multiple cards, and then just having that ready to go so that if I only have a few minutes to sit down and paint, I can get right to the painting because that for me is the most relaxing part. This is also a great way if you like to have really unique and really special Christmas cards each year. You could have just like a basket. I like to use actually photo boxes to organize different projects, and you can have that everything stamped and ready to go. You could work on it essentially all year. Just be working on your Christmas cards, have them stamped, and then get to them and paint them whenever you have time, and it takes the pressure off. You can just really take your time and enjoy the process then. So you can see I finished both of the candlesticks, and now I'm going to go in and work on the holly leaves, which are so elegantly wrapped around here. I love the curve to this holly and the berries as they wrap around and sort of move up to the left side of the image. What I'm going to do is put down the mostly just the Distress Ink Reinker on my brush, putting that down into the part of the leaf that is closest to like the stem of the plant, and then I rinse off my brush in my water cup, pat it on my paper towel, and then blend the darker color moving out into the rest of the leaf. So you can see putting that darker color down, rinsing off the brush, coming back and blending it with just water on the brush, and that creates that light to dark look. If I need to go back and darken things up, I can drop in more of the Distress Ink Reinker, which I'm using as a watercolor, and blend it out. And you could follow this same process with any type of watercolor that you like, that you have in your stash. It doesn't have to be the Distress Ink Reinkers. I just love the boldness of the color with those. So I finished up all the leaves following that same process, and here I'm going to work on the flames of the candles. You can see that the sentiment upside down right now is brightest blessings, which is a perfect match, I think, with this particular image, the candle set. And I will dry that with my heat gun because I'm going to be painting the section that's right next to it, that inner portion. So I wanted to be sure the outer portion was dry before I added more water and wetness to that. Now I'm going to go in and paint the berries. Now I do not want to do different shading on all of the berries. They're small and fiddly, and so I'm going to do the easy way out here. And instead of adding variation to each berry, I'm going to just add different colors of berries. And this helps differentiate between the different ones, especially those that are right next to each other. It adds some interest, and I think using just a touch of pink is very dynamic. Now for the berries, I am using the gouache, Arteza gouache paints. Again, I talk about those in the Getting Ready with Me or Get Ready to Paint with Me video that's linked down below. I like the opacity and the brightness of these paints, and it just something about the reds and the pinks in those paints that I especially love. So I finished up the berries and actually had a little bit of green. I meant to just go in with a little bit of brown here, but there was some green on my brush, but never fear, I'm not going to stop. I grabbed some gray, which blended out with that, and I'm just adding a little touch of that to the candles so that they look finished and not just a stark white. So sorry there that I'm off camera, but what I'm doing is just adding that, leaving some white, but just adding that around. And also getting that little edge right there on both of them. There we go. And that is part of the stamp, so it will guide you where to paint that. And I will dry that. And add the wick there. Next, I decided to use a detail brush and the same color that I used for the table, the brown there, but just more a heavier concentration of ink than water, and draw some lines, and then I am just blending them out with just water. And when I first did this, I thought, oh my gosh, I ruined it. But watercolor is very forgiving. So I will kind of blend those out with water with the detail brush, and then I'm also going to go in with some water on my larger brush, and you can see there by doing that it just faded them out more, and I was much happier with that look. You can still see them even more so once they dry. I think it definitely added to the finished product, but it wasn't so scary as it was when I first did it. And then finally, the last step is I'm going to take a fine point Arteza twine marker and trace over the stems here. So I feel like I'm usually much steadier with my hand with a fine point marker than I am with a paintbrush. So I'm reaching for this. I did leave it for the last step because this particular marker is not waterproof. So I did not want to do this and then add any water around it and have that bleed out. And the card is complete. It's just ready to be mounted to a note card. So here's a look at this one layer card. Such fun to paint and really a beauty to send and mail for the holidays. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. That way you won't miss any of the future videos. I have more coming with this technique, but with different stamps. So ring that bell down below by the subscription button and you'll get notified whenever I have a new upload. You can also connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, as well as Instagram, our website, and blog, and they're all linked for you down in the description box. Happy stamping!